Pleased to welcome Sarah Gibbons and Susan Back to speak to us today about the Senior Friendly Caregiver Education Project. Sarah is a Knowledge to Practice specialist with the Regional Geriatrics Program of Ontario. She's an experienced registered nurse and clinical nurse specialist in geriatrics, and she's currently pursuing her PhD in the Aging and Health Program at Queen's University, and also an interdisciplinary fellow of the Canadian Frailty Network. Susan Back is a project manager with the Regional Geriatrics Program of Ontario. She has an MA in Adult Education and a BSc in Biology. Her career spanning government and healthcare has been focused on helping teams to do their best possible work. Before we get started, I'd like to let you know how to engage with our presenters today. Please type any questions you have for them in the chat box and they'll answer them at the end of the presentation. And I'll start by answering the most commonly asked question: can we have a copy of the recording for this webinar? And the answer is yes, you can. We will send it to attendees and post it on our website and YouTube channel. And with that, I'd like to invite Sarah and Susan to take the stage.
Thank you, Wendy. Sarah's just loading our presentation. This is Susan Back speaking. Thanks so much for this opportunity to tell you about this project that we've been working on. There's a team of people behind the project. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've been up to. Sarah Gibbons will be doing the presenting. She's our Knowledge to Practice specialist. And Christy Nash, who's off doing other things today to move the project forward, is responsible for communications and evaluation. We have a team of people, which we call the steering committee, who first initiated this project and are now guiding it. It consists of physicians, nurses, healthcare educators, and administrators from all across the province. We're all working together on a project which directly involves caregivers as well as subject matter experts. We are building educational resources for use by family and friends who are caring for seniors living with frailty. And at the end of the project, we'll have enduring resources for an online course, a website with information, resources, strategies, and tips. We already have a first-year report, and there will be a final report on the project available to you in March. We are looking for help promoting the resources that we're building to caregivers, and that's how partners like you can help us. We'll have information on our website, posters, and postcards, which we can distribute to you. So that's all I have to say, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah at this point.
Thank you very much, Susan. That was a really nice overview. I'll go into all of what you've said in more detail. Thanks also to the RGPT team. We are so honored to be able to do this work and so grateful for the opportunity to speak to all of you very brilliant people about something we're all very passionate about. So that I have to learn how to use all of this technology. The Senior Friendly Caregiver Education Project is a 2-year project led by the Regional Geriatric Programs of Ontario. It was developed in partnership with 7 RGPs across Ontario, and it is funded by the Ministry of Health until March 2020. So just to reiterate what Susan has just shared, the purpose of our work is to develop educational resources with and for family and friend caregivers caring for seniors who experience frailty. And now I'm going to test my wonderful technology skills again, and I really want to share our video with you. So give me 1 second. I think I've got this. 1 minute and 35 seconds. Here we go.
With my mother, she started at age 60. I didn't think of myself as a caregiver at the time. You don't think at that age and that it's gonna come so soon, and you're not prepared at all.
God was like, what's happening, if maybe I knew a little bit about, about sickness, health, it could have been different, but I had no clue.
Takes a lot of work as a caregiver to learn what the resources are and to learn how to access them.
We didn't know how to start, where to start, what to do, who to call, and what kind of help we can get.
I think education is key, and it's important that the caregiver, such as myself, attend these free educational sessions for caregivers.
We shared a lot of stuff I didn't even know about that are actually free, but even me, like a nurse, I didn't even know about that.
You don't have to be a professional to be helpful to your loved ones.
Caregiving is a very lonely role, and there are other people out there having the same experience and learning from those experiences. So to understand that you're not alone in the role is very important.
So before we begin, there are some points that we'd like to bring to your attention. So for purposes of this project, first of all, the definition that we use of caregiver is an unpaid family member or friend who support older adults living with frailty. And now these caregivers are relied upon and in some cases expected to provide medical care in the community, figure out complicated health systems, navigate from specialist to specialist on their own, and then act as substitute decision makers for some of the most complex and challenging life decisions that some of us have never maybe even experienced before. And a critical point about what the Change Foundation made in their Spotlight on Ontario's Caregivers report was that caregivers are providing approximately 75% of all patient care in Canada. So needless to say, supporting the education of these caregivers is an important ethical issue. So if this quality improvement project is about family and friend caregivers, why are we going to lengths to speak to healthcare professionals? So I imagine that it doesn't come as a surprise to you, but you're really key stakeholders in how we reach caregivers and support them across Ontario. They look to you for answers, even though they might not actually know how to ask the questions. Caregivers have shared that they are looking for resources that meet their learning needs, but that these are challenging to find. And this also may not come as a surprise to tell you that although caregivers mostly remain pretty positive about their role, many feel stressed, overwhelmed, at times helpless, and frustrated. And I'm sure you see this in your work on a daily basis. And finally, we are speaking with you because this is what caregivers asked us to do. They asked us to share our results with healthcare professionals so that we might create a little bit more synergy. So our goals of the project are to create educational resources about frailty for family and friend caregivers, to design these resources with caregivers using a co-design approach, and to meet the learning needs of caregivers in order to support an improvement in knowledge, ability, attitude, and confidence in care, and ability to self-care. And we want to reach 25,000 caregivers with these resources by March 2020. All right, so here's where I stop and ask the audience a very quick question. So I mentioned co-design. Perhaps you've used the term before, maybe you've used the methodology, or maybe you've heard that your organizations are using a co-design approach. Alekia or Wendy, yes. So I'll let you read the following poll and feel free to select the correct answer. All right. Okay, so it looks like I was right. You guys are brilliant. Co-design is absolutely a method of creating something new with the end user of the final product. It engages that end user throughout the whole journey, and it goes beyond consultation. So it goes beyond creating something and then asking for caregivers' opinion on it after the fact. It really takes them through the entire journey with you. So what will caregivers learn about as a result of this work? We used the RGP of Toronto Senior Friendly 7 toolkit. Many of you may have already seen this toolkit, and we used those topics as the basis of our application to the Ministry of Health for our project funding, and the Senior Friendly 7 were also used as a foundation for our focus group discussions with caregivers, and I'll get to that in a minute. But after listening to caregivers, our educational resources, sort of to summarize, the topics that we're going to focus on are caring for the caregiver, pain, staying active, which is the mobility piece, nutrition, bladder health, medication management, which is the polypharmacy, changes in thinking and behavior, which is the delirium, and social engagement. I just want to note right now that the education is not about providing healthcare training, and the education that we're providing is not about medical advice. Another quick question for you. This is not a poll, it's more of a chat box response. As I read these topics out to you, you might see them and start to consider them as they relate to your practice. And I'd like to know, what topics do you find that you're speaking to caregivers mostly about these days? Maybe it varies. Perhaps one person could be really brave and tell us more about that. Secondly, do you currently feel that you have quick and easy access resources to provide caregivers about these topics? If not, would you find that useful to your practice, given that is what we are creating? So yeah, write your answers in the chat box. Wendy is going to monitor them and then read them out when there's maybe one or two up there.
Great, we've got some answers coming in here. Some the audience may not be able to see because it's come to all panelists, but I'll read what's coming in. So changes in thinking and behavior, staying active and keeping brain healthy, social engagement, caring for the caregiver. Somebody writes, I regularly discuss all, but the one I spend a lot of time on is medication management.
Okay, wow.
There's lots coming in here. I'll just read a few more. I feel like it is difficult to have many available resources to provide to caregivers, but if we had the resources, it would be a great resource. And actually, there's just a variety of answers coming in, from delirium to hydration, eating well, bladder, brain health. So pretty much everything mentioned here is coming up. Excellent.
Thank you all so much. That's very pleasing to hear. I'll move on. Thank you. Let me give you the overview of our project. It's laid out in 4 phases. So phase 1 is our knowledge creation phase. This first phase was about getting on our feet, planning, preparing our overall project. And we did a lot of logistics work for our focus groups that we were planning on doing. This phase went by pretty quickly. Moving us into phase 2, our knowledge transfer phase, probably the most essential phase, because if we didn't get this phase right with caregivers, our outcomes wouldn't be right. The bulk of this phase was taken up by our focus group sessions, our analysis of focus group results, and then synthesizing those results in order to be really clear about what we mean and how they might influence the project moving forward. So knowledge translation is the phase 3. We are in that now. We're coming to the end of it. This is where we actually took the synthesized results of the focus groups and then planned out what we would build as a result of what caregivers said they wanted. We convened an educators working group, in which I will get to in detail. And then together we mapped out all of the resources that we would build. We have begun to build them. We are in the process of testing them. with really key stakeholders, and we're in the process of finalizing them, like I said. Moving us into phase 4, our knowledge, implementation, and evaluation. And final phase, this is where our resources will be going live this fall, and we will be completing a final evaluation of our products and then reporting back to the Ministry of Health. And our work wraps up in March, but like Susan said at the beginning, these resources are meant to endure past project stop date. Okay, so I mentioned the focus groups were really the beginning and bulk of our second phase. The purpose of getting caregivers together in the same room was to understand what they want to learn and how caregivers prefer to learn about topics that are associated with frailty. So in these focus groups, caregivers completed individual questionnaires. They described their experiences with us and with each other. They brainstormed their personal strengths and preferred learning approaches. They answered our questions that we had for them. And they also reviewed existing educational materials like the Senior Friendly 7 Toolkit to offer feedback on the meaningfulness of the topics. We also linked up with health and community services and volunteers from each local area of Ontario that we visited to help us moderate small and large group discussions. Each facilitator was really knowledgeable about their own local area, and that is who supported us to find really reputable venues for caregivers. So each facilitator was sat with about 2 to 4 caregivers, and that was one of the key ways that we supported the warm, respectful environment that we were looking for. And then I think we had about on average of 6 to 8 facilitators per session. So in total, over 7 months of our second phase, our team visited 10 communities. We listened to 133 caregivers. Just a quick note here, our team offered respite and mileage reimbursement for caregiver attendance, knowing that many can't make it out of their house for 30 minutes, let alone the 3 hours that we were asking them to participate in. And we collaborated with 78 total facilitators across Ontario. The caregivers that attended our focus group sessions were all unique. They were multi-generational. They had different backgrounds, different experiences. They had really unique relationships with the person that they were caring for. Some were caring for one person, others were caring for multiple people at the same time. They were all incredibly eager to learn, and they came with different preferred learning styles. To simplify, we asked caregivers 5 questions over the duration of each focus group session. What do you want to learn about? What increases your strength in the role? What would you teach other caregivers? What feedback do you have regarding education and the Senior Friendly 7 topics? And how do you currently enjoy learning, and how would you prefer to learn about frailty? So after looking at each focus group results and then looking at these results across all 10 focus groups, themes started to emerge from the data. And as I share these results with you, just keep in mind how they might apply to your practice, your organization, and your programs. So the first question was, what do caregivers want to learn about? So in relation to the 7 topics that you can see on your screen, caregivers told us that they want to know, 1, information, clinical topics in a way that I can understand, and that's a caregiver-friendly language. The resources, 2. What are they, and how do I find them? Where do I find them? What do I have access to as a caregiver? And 3, strategies. What is the practical application of this knowledge and this information that you're giving me? What is the how-to? Number 1, continued. So we actually left our focus groups open. Although we had sort of a timeline and you have to kind of stick to an agenda, we still left our focus groups open in regards to not being too strict around what we talk about in terms of the topics that they want to learn. And as a result of this openness, this concept of an 8th topic actually emerged. The caregivers call it caring for the caregiver. Obviously, it's about self-care. consistently caregivers were telling us that they want to learn about self-care, because if how can I learn about clinical topics if I don't know how to take care of myself first? So although it's an 8th topic, they mentioned maybe addressing that learning need first. Okay, question 2. So we asked, what increases caregiver strength in the role? This is where we wanted to know what makes a caregiver feel strong and resilient in their role, what keeps them going. And then 6 themes actually emerged from that. So caregivers feel strong when they link up with meaningful social networks. So examples include friends, family, other caregivers, clubs, partners, etc. When they feel knowledgeable. So examples include knowledge of the person that they care for, knowledge about the topics, knowledge about caregiving, etc. Number 3, when they feel supported by healthcare professionals. Examples include feeling like they can count on somebody who understands the system, feeling like somebody is looking out for them and helping them navigate the system. When they are caring for themselves, so that examples include biking, yoga, walking the dogs, relaxing, resting, etc. When they focus on positive feelings that they feel as a result of caregiving. So examples of that mean, an example would be, so I'm giving back to someone who cared for me and that makes me feel really good. Or I like seeing my mom happy, it makes me happy. And then finally, they feel strong when they can draw upon a source that's within themselves. So examples include characteristics like integrity, respect, love, patience, faith, etc. Question 3, what would caregivers teach other caregivers? So we wanted to know what caregivers would teach, knowing what they know now from their previous experiences. Answers to this question we thought would guide the development of what our final educational resources would look like in the end. So 5 themes emerged. Caregivers would teach other caregivers to understand their role and what to expect, to understand the person they're caring for, to get connected. They would teach other caregivers to know how to care for themselves and to never stop advocating for the person that they're caring for. Okay, here we go. Another quick question for the audience. The results up on your screen are really important to caregivers, to their learning, and how you might support them in your work. Can you apply any of these results? Maybe you already do to your practice or your programs. Maybe somebody brave could just maybe share an example of how maybe they would, or maybe they already do. Did any of these resonate with you as healthcare professionals? We'll give it a minute.
So I think lots of people are pondering the question, and a few answers are coming in. One says, I refer to the Dementia Society often as a resource for caregivers and emphasize the importance of self-care plus. Another shares that we have a family team that allows and invites all caregivers to come and voice their concerns, their support for each other, and ask any questions they need to ask.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And one more, perhaps the most important finding you have presented thus far is that it's critical for caregivers to feel supported by healthcare professionals.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Thank you. So moving on. Question 4. So we asked, what feedback do caregivers have about the educational resources and the Senior Friendly 7 toolkit? So they told us that the topics, the Senior Friendly 7 topics, are really helpful, really relevant to their caregiving, as you have all shared in that first question that I asked around what you're talking to caregivers about. Some even suggest that they would have loved to have had this language, this content years ago. They look back to their past and they said things may have been a bit easier for them in their caregiving. However, there's definitely consistent feedback to change language to be more caregiver friendly, and they want to add more content about strategies rather than sort of they prioritized the need to learn strategies over backgrounds and facts. They said, just get to the point. They want us to add content about self-care, as I've already mentioned previously. And like I said before as well, they want that learning need to be addressed before other clinical topics are addressed. Question 5, we asked, how do caregivers prefer to learn about frailty in the future? The top 3 methods were support groups, second was online, and third was booklets. So that summarizes our results section. Now I'm going to move on and tell you about our build phase, so phase 3. The purpose of phase 3 was to take our results and make something out of them. So noting that caregivers wanted online learning, print resources, and then also wanted to connect and learn through other caregivers. So in order to begin phase 3, we convened an educators working group made up of approximately 15 people who were caregivers, health professionals, and educational experts. These people came with incredibly diverse experiences and skills, and they brought a lot of value to the planning of these resources. We also established partnerships with experts in the field of delivering online education. So that was with McMaster Continuing Education and Desire to Learn, D2L, with their learning management system platform. So this is our visual representation of what caregivers told us about how they prefer to learn, and then how we map that towards launching live in the fall. So what I'd like you to take away from this slide is that a rigorous review process was applied to all of the drafts of everything that we've created. So this included review by caregivers, multiple experts in the content, and in copywriting. And a combination of marketing strategy to reach caregivers and knowledge dissemination to folks like you. We are really priming ourselves to be ready for public launch in this fall. So for our final phase, I'll share a brief overview of our educational resources that we actually created, and then tell you how you can help. So we created 3 resources to fulfill 3 different ways of learning. The number 1 resource, the Caregiver Strategies Handbook. So this is a handbook that can be downloaded, it can be printed as a whole or in separate chunks. It's divided into 8 chapters. Caregivers can learn at their own pace and read the chapters that are most meaningful to them at their own time. This resource includes lots of link outs and resources that are available, people and organizations that they can get involved in to understand resources that are local to them. And it aligns with people who want to learn through print resources and who do not have necessarily capability to get online as easy. Number 2, our Caregiving Strategies free online course. This is designed to take that handbook content and dive into more of a learning journey over 8 weeks. It's a deeper dive into the content. Caregivers can engage through activities and tools. They can apply new knowledge to their own situations. They can also connect with other caregivers in the discussion forum. And this course isn't for everyone. It's designed for people who said that they prefer to learn online. And number 3, the Caregiving Strategies website. This is where caregivers and healthcare professionals can access resources, tools, register for the course, receive updates, and so on. So we need your help. You are really key stakeholders in reviewing and sharing these new resources with caregivers who are potentially your clients. You also play a role to ensure that people with limited online capability can still access these resources. I've sent the RGPT team a poster that will be shared with you, so you can review, you can make copies, you can share them with your clients and their caregivers as you see appropriate. You also play a role in not falling into stereotype beliefs about the way caregivers prefer to learn. We've told you the top 3 learning methods that caregivers say they like to learn. And actually, I'd like just to take 1 second to advocate Susan and Christy and myself have heard some comments here and there. They're not rampant by any means, but there is this stereotype that, people, I've even heard over 50, people over 50 are computer illiterate. So, we've got to be concerned about an online course offering. This is how people currently learn. This is how, like I said, Caregivers told us is one of their top 3 ways of preferring to learn. And it's been a popular way of learning for about 30 years. So we ask that you don't fall into that trap and really allow caregivers to see what the resources they have are available and then make that choice. Make their own choice, whether they want to do online learning or not. If you have questions about this work, please feel free to email the project manager, Susan Back. Visit our website as we get that up and running. In the website, information is on that poster as well that will be sent to you. And please help us get ready for launch by noting some of the following dates. So our website goes live early October. We're thinking like October 10th. Our handbook's going to go live mid-October. Our complete online course goes live early November. We're planning for a November 4th launch date. And a final report of this entire project will be available in March 2020. So I have 2 final questions for you. Again, they're abstract a little bit. So are there ways that you can help us share these resources through your practice or programs? Maybe somebody could share an example. And is there anything that you need from our team in order to make the process of sharing these resources with caregivers that you come in contact with easier? Now I'll let Wendy monitor the chat box.
So comments are coming in already. As a nursing home, we can provide the handout and discuss the resource at admission. There was a question about providing French translation, and I see that Susan has answered in the chat box that yes, we're planning to a French translation of the handbook, which will be available on the RGPs of Ontario website.
Thank you to that first comment about providing that resource on admission. Just noting that caregivers still self-identify as caregivers, even if there's an assumption that maybe that caregiving responsibility, because it's not right directly in the home, that isn't the case. It would be incredibly useful.
More comments are coming in. A great connection to share with this information would be with the self-management programs in each region of Ontario. A suggestion for colorful cards with the website and how to access tools. Any media plan to launch these tools across the province?
Right, Susan, I wonder if you can speak to the media question, and I'll just quickly say I love these suggestions. It really validates that we're on the right track. We've created some nice colorful postcards that I'm actually going to go and pick up this afternoon, so I'll look for those in your area, and we'll keep thinking of ways to get some of that sharing to your inboxes as well.
Many more suggestions are coming in here. Lynn self-management programs can be a source of connection. Waterloo Wellington Older Adult Strategy has caregiver champions and a web-based platform and newsletter to promote and encourage the uptake. We could provide this to our social workers across the province who can deliver directly to care partners.
Amazing, amazing.
Hi, Wendy. Susan speaking.
Hi, Susan. Welcome.
I thought maybe I'd talk a little bit about our promotion strategy.
Wonderful.
Because there was a question about how we will involve media. The promotion strategy begins with presentations like this in which we develop partnerships with other organizations. The organizations that are on the ground connected with caregivers, such as the Ontario Association of the Ontario Personal Support Workers Association, are actively involved in helping us get the information directly into the homes where there are caregivers and frail seniors. So we have a partnership with the PSW Association and we are developing partnerships with others who have direct contact with caregivers in their homes. So material will be available to leave behind in people's homes. So that's sort of our first strategy around connecting with caregivers. We do have plans to have advertisements in Zoomer magazine, the online Zoomer magazine, and place ads on websites such as the website operated by the Ontario Caregiver organization, and there's several others on our list. Also, Sarah didn't mention, but she's been very active in attempting to get opportunities to present at conferences. So Sarah is going to Ottawa and Kingston in the local Regional Geriatric Programs annual meetings. Sarah is also presenting at the Canadian Frailty Network annual conference, which is in 2 weeks' time, and in Moncton at the Canadian Association on Gerontology at the end of October.
Wonderful. And I see there's actually many, many, many comments coming in from the attendees on all kinds of additional ways that you may want to consider spreading this information and how they can help. So,
oh, that's so great. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to let everyone know, although we haven't read all of the comments out loud, they will all be provided to the presenters, and your comments are thoughtful and helpful. And we
thank
them.
you. Yes, yes.
So I think you wanted to move on to some acknowledgements, and then we'll have some time for questions from the audience.
Great. Yeah, so that's about enough of me. Like Susan said at the beginning, we acknowledge that there are a lot of people that are supporting this work, thanks to the steering committee, to the educators working group, to caregivers that are taking time out of their very limited days to support and to test and to provide feedback and to put their heads down with us and really create something meaningful in the end. That is our contact information for those of you who want to contact any of us in terms of our scope for this project. And if there's any other additional questions, that's the end of that. And Wendy, you said that this is recorded and will be sent, or just
that's right. No, we'll provide the recording and slides to attendees, but we'd like to open it up now again in the chat box. Please feel free to type any additional questions or thoughts you have for Susan and Sarah about this. And I'll just start with one that came up earlier, and it was in relation to what you discuss most frequently with caregivers, and education around providing physical care, because there's a shortage of PSWs, was something that somebody mentioned. And I just wanted to say that I was actually privileged to be able to test out the beta version of the online course, and there's such practical approaches, tips, and tools in there, like short videos on how to help somebody move from bed to chair or help them walk if they've got mobility issues. So I think there will be some great tips there for people, and I would encourage other healthcare providers to read the booklet, take the online course so you know what's there, and you'll have some extra tools to give to caregivers as well.
That's a really great suggestion, Wendy. I mean, even it's free to register. You can breeze through it. You know, it's not designed for healthcare professional training, but like Wendy said, it would be super great to review, see what's there. Even if you worked through the registration process and, you know, could visualize that, maybe support a caregiver to do the same.
So again, we'll just wait for a few more questions to come through the chat box if there are any. And I'll just throw one more out there for you folks. You know, just thinking that often when we work with older adults and caregivers and they're actively involved in the work that we're doing, such as this type of project, they share some really meaningful stories, and you captured some beautiful portraits of that in the video. And I just wanted to know if there was anything else that comes to mind that you could share in terms of what, you know, how this makes this work so important.
It's a really excellent question. I think there was many times, you know, Susan and Christy and I and members of people in our focus group sessions were brought to tears by some of the stories. And it was so amazing to see how eager caregivers were to connect with others and to share. And they had a lot to say. And really, I think the most important, and I hope I'm answering your question correctly, but the most important thing that's come from all of this is that those are the stories that are actually the foundation of this work. Like I said, right down to what they wanted to learn about and how, in what ways. So we were actually honored to be able to have the time face-to-face with caregivers across the province and hear what they actually have to say, and that they were validating the need for these topics to be shared with them.
Wonderful. So no more questions have come in through the, well, there's one. Can you speak a little bit about how you considered cultural differences in the design of these resources?
Yeah, I mean, we had an evaluation form at the end of every focus group sessions, and we were able to receive actually recommendations from the caregivers on that. What I think we wanted to make sure that we did to simplify is to allow the resources to be personalized in their own way. So not necessarily streamlining it, but to allow a caregiver just to personalize it to their own situation. I hope that's answered the question. Maybe if Susan has any additional.
I'd just like to add that we had an audience of 133 caregivers who took time out of caregiving to spend 3 hours with us. This was right across the province. My personal feeling was that partly because we weren't in very many large urban centers, really Ottawa was the largest urban center that we were at, and that's where we got most cultural diversity and therefore most input from other than a sort of a mainstream white educated culture. That's where we got most input. I do feel that we could do better as a sort of a second phase of the project, and it would be something that I would be recommending, that we actually workshop the handbook and the course with different cultural groups to see whether or not there are a greater range of perspectives that we could incorporate in our work. So that and this really, I'm speaking from my own personal observations, but that would be, I think, a really important next step for our project.
Great. There's a few more questions coming through. My experience as an Alzheimer's Society educator is that caregivers experience tremendous grief along the way. Did this come up?
Yeah, it did. And it was nice to be able to provide flexibility for that, because what comes from that in those discussions with caregivers is really helpful for us in our building of these resources. You know, we started some of the sessions off and we had different questions, and you know, with that qualitative approach, like your questions change as you move along and you sort of see what themes are emerging. And we were asking people, you know, what they loved about caregiving, rather than, you know, really focusing on what the strengths are. And some were saying, you know, I don't love anything about it. So the grieving also is sort of just underpins some of the way people interact with each other. And we had a couple of different times where we were able to make connections with those people and get them the resources that they needed. And another reason that we included facilitators that lived in the areas that we traveled to, Those were individuals that were hearing the comments and participating openly, and some of them were the exact people that these people could connect with in the system. So it was nice to be open to that grieving process and to be comfortable with it, because they were all feeling it.
It's wonderful to hear the approach that was used and the availability of that space to allow people to express that, for sure. A few more questions. I understand that these resources have been designed specifically for caregivers who are supporting seniors with frailty, but I'm wondering, to what extent are the resources and strategies applicable more broadly to all caregivers?
It was within our project sort of boundaries that we wanted to make sure that that this marginalized group had resources that were specifically focused on them. The other side of me is saying, I don't know how much we would generalize what the caregivers said. Like, it's their data, right? That this data is grounded in what this target audience, these target participants told us that they wanted to know, and it's based on their experiences. That is something that I would probably have to think about maybe a little bit longer to answer. I don't know if Susan has any comments about generalizability of these resources.
Yeah, I would say that they're somewhat generalizable to be helpful to caregivers who are looking after older adults. I don't think they're particularly useful for caregivers looking after young children who require significant medical care. So I could see, we don't talk about seniors with all the various types of diseases that can impact a senior's life. This is really for frail seniors. But of course, someone who is older, who has a life-threatening disease, may well also be quite frail. So I see that there's some broadening to that audience. But as I say, I don't think it's particularly useful for caregivers of young children.
Okay. And one final question, wondering if advanced care planning came up as a topic amongst caregivers.
Yeah, certainly. End of life, palliative, advanced care planning, it definitely came up. Such a wide range of topics came up, and we addressed those types of needs within sort of the start of our clinical topics. In our resources, you'll notice the first chapter is really targeted towards caregivers learning about themselves, and we broadened the topic of self-care to also include learning about all of those other things as well. So we actually put a lot of effort into linking them to really reputable organizations that help them learn, because that information is already out there. And that being said, we did the same for dementia. A lot of work and a lot of reputable resources and education for caregivers is out there around both of those topics. So we address that in our resources, but we didn't recreate the wheel.
Okay. So I think as part of your deck, you have some references to share that, and they'll be distributed with this deck. That's on the final slide. And we just wanted to say thank you very much, Sarah and Susan, for this great learning opportunity. And we also wanted to thank everyone for attending the webinar and just let them know that they're going to receive a short evaluation survey by email. So please feel free to share suggestions and topics for future webinars with us. We also wanted to give you a heads up that we've got some wonderful prizes to give you today. So Mayor John Tory proclaimed this past Tuesday as Rehabilitation Day in Toronto. And the SF Care Learning Series, which we launched in July 10th, has some great resources on mobilization, which can really help with rehabilitation. And we'd like your help with spreading the word about the SF Care Learning Series as well. And so the first 10 people to comment on our SF Care Learning Series mobility materials on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn will win posters. And we hope to be able to do this as well with the Caregiver Education Learning Series too. We also want to invite you to our next webinar, which will be on October 18th, and it's Reporting on Fitness to Drive and Dementia in Ontario, What's New Since 2018. And the presenters will be Dr. Gary Nagley from Baycrest and Dr. Mark Rappaport from Sunnybrook. Registration information for the webinar will be emailed to you soon. So I see lots of thank yous coming in the chat box. Again, we'll share those with the presenters. And I just wanted to say thanks again to everyone, and we'll see you next time. We're signing off now.